At the edge of a forgotten village, shrouded in mist and legend, stood Willow Manor, a mansion as grand as it was eerie. It loomed over the valley like a giant stone sentinel, with ivy crawling up its walls, windows broken and shuttered, and a roof that sagged under the weight of a century's worth of secrets. For most, it was a place to avoid, a forbidden landmark that carried too many ghost stories. But for Jacob and Lily, a young couple looking for a fresh start, Willow Manor was exactly what they wanted.
It's perfect!
Lily had gasped when they first laid eyes on it.
Think of the stories we'll have to tell about this place.
Yeah.
Jacob had agreed with a grin.
A big, beautiful house for almost nothing? They'll call us crazy.
He didn't know how right he was. On their first night in the manor, the air was thick with anticipation and the scent of dust and old wood. They explored the creaky hallways together, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they marveled at the high ceilings and antique furniture left behind.
Can you believe someone just left all this here?
Lily whispered, her fingers trailing along a dusty vanity.
Look at this mirror. It's practically an heirloom.
Jacob laughed, his voice echoing in the empty room.
Maybe they just had bad taste. Or maybe they were in a hurry to get out of here.
As night fell, they settled into the master bedroom, an expansive chamber with an ornate canopy bed and towering windows covered in tattered curtains. The silence was almost reverent, broken only by the occasional gust of wind that made the windows rattle. Then, just as they were drifting off, they heard it. A faint sound like footsteps moving slowly down the hallway outside their room. Jacob opened his eyes, groggy but alert.
Did you hear that?
He whispered, propping himself up on his elbow.
Yeah.
Lily replied, her voice shaky.
Maybe it's just the house settling?
They waited, breaths held, but the sound didn't return. Finally, Jacob shrugged, pulling her closer.
Old house noises, babe. Nothing to worry about.
But the footsteps came again the next night and the next. Every night they grew louder, closer, as if something or someone was pacing just outside their bedroom door. One morning, Lily confided in Jacob, her voice barely more than a whisper.
I think I saw someone last night. A woman? She was standing in the hallway.
Jacob chuckled nervously, though a flicker of doubt creased his brow.
Come on, Lily. It's just your imagination. We're both just getting used to this place.
But that same night, Lily was jolted awake by the soft murmur of a woman's voice, drifting in from the empty hallways.
This is my house.
She lay in bed, paralyzed, listening to the strange, almost melodic whispers that seemed to seep through the walls. She glanced at Jacob, who was still sound asleep, and closed her eyes tight, willing the voice to go away. But it only grew louder, and she swore she could feel cold fingers grazing her skin like a breath of icy air. The next morning, Jacob noticed how pale she looked.
Are you all right?
Something's wrong with this place.
She stammered.
It's not just noises, Jacob. I felt something last night.
Jacob wrapped an arm around her, trying to soothe her.
Hey, listen to yourself. It's just an old house.
But the truth was, he was beginning to feel it too. The rooms seemed darker, the air heavier. Sometimes he thought he caught glimpses of movement in his peripheral vision, though nothing was ever there when he turned to look. A few days later, while rummaging through the attic, they found a dusty, old chest. Curiosity piqued, they forced it open, revealing a tattered leather-bound journal inside. Flipping through the pages, they found the entries dated back to the 1800s and belonged to a woman named Eleanor, the previous owner of Willow Manor. The entries began innocently enough, with Eleanor describing her life at the manor with her husband Thomas. But soon, the tone shifted, growing darker and more frantic.
Thomas has changed. He disappears at night, wandering the halls like a ghost. I barely recognize him anymore. The house has claimed him, and I fear it will claim me too.
Lily shuddered as she read the final entry aloud, her voice trembling.
I fear he is still here, watching, waiting.
Jacob forced a laugh, though his voice sounded thin.
Eleanor must have been going mad. People back then were superstitious, right?
But Lily wasn't convinced. She stared at the journal, her face pale.
Do you think Thomas's spirit could still be here?
That night, as they lay in bed, Jacob squeezed her hand tightly.
It's just a story, babe. We're safe.
But just as he said it, the temperature in the room plummeted. A slow, creeping chill settled over them, making their breath turn to mist. And then, the footsteps came again, louder than before, echoing through the hallway like someone pounding up the stairs. Jacob bolted up, his heart hammering.
Who's there?
He shouted into the darkness, but only silence answered him. Desperate to escape, they ran to the front door, but as they reached the front door, it wouldn't budge. Jacob twisted the handle, throwing his weight against it, but it was as if some invisible force was holding it shut. Lily frantically tried the windows, but they wouldn't open either. It felt as though the entire house was trapping them, closing in tighter with every passing second.
Jacob, what's happening?
Lily whispered, her voice shaking as she pressed herself against him. He shook his head, breathing heavily.
I don't know, but we're getting out of here. Now!
They stumbled down the hallway, trying every door, but each one was locked tight. The air was growing colder, thick with a strange metallic taste, and the shadows seemed to writhe along the walls, stretching and twisting into forms that looked almost human. In a panic, they stumbled into the basement, hoping to find another way out. The basement was dark and smelled of damp earth. Jacob held his phone flashlight in front of them, its weak beam casting eerie shadows across the stone walls. At the far end of the room, they spotted a small door almost hidden behind an old stack of crates. Heart pounding, Jacob pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending further underground.
Should we go down there?
Lily asked, her voice barely audible.
Do we have a choice?
He replied, his jaw clenched. They took slow, hesitant steps down the narrow staircase. At the bottom, they found themselves in a strange, hidden chamber, lit by 2 candles that burned with a faint greenish glow. In the center of the room was a shrine, with symbols etched into the walls that neither of them recognized. And there, carved into the stone, were 2 names, Eleanor and Lily. Lily's breath caught in her throat. She backed away, shaking her head.
No, this can't be happening. Jacob, why is my name on this wall?
But Jacob just stared, his face blank, his eyes unfocused. In the dim, flickering light, his features seemed to twist and distort, his eyes darkening to an empty, hollow black. When he spoke, it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, colder. A voice filled with something ancient and malicious.
Because she's been waiting for you.
Lily stumbled back, her heart racing.
Jacob, what's happening? This isn't funny.
But he took a step closer, his movements slow, almost mechanical.
She needed someone to join her, and you were perfect.
He whispered, his voice echoing strangely in the small room. Lily's mind raced, her hands trembling as she backed toward the staircase.
Jacob, please, snap out of it. We have to get out of here.
But he only laughed, a cold, hollow laugh that sent chills down her spine. His gaze bore into her, unblinking, as he spoke again, the voice no longer his.
Eleanor couldn't leave. She was down here, waiting for someone to take her place.
Lily's blood turned to ice as the realization sank in. Eleanor hadn't been haunting the house to keep people out. She had been searching for someone, a new soul to tether to the manor. And Jacob. He had been claimed, just like Eleanor's husband before him. She turned and sprinted up the staircase, her pulse pounding in her ears. Behind her she heard Jacob's slow, deliberate footsteps, each one echoing through the dark like a death knell. She reached the top of the stairs and slammed the door shut, throwing herself against it as she tried to catch her breath. But even through the heavy wood, she could hear him whispering her name, his voice a chilling monotone. Desperate, she ran through the house, her eyes darting around for any way out. But the rooms had changed, twisting into strange, unfamiliar shapes. The corridors stretched and narrowed, doors appeared and vanished, and the house itself seemed to pulse with a life of its own, shifting and reshaping to trap her within. At last, she stumbled into the master bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. She leaned against it, panting, her mind racing as she searched for a plan, anything that could save her. Her eyes landed on the journal lying open on the bed where she had left it. Frantically, she flipped to the last page, desperate to find some kind of answer. The final entry was scrawled in shaky, frantic handwriting, but one line stood out, written in bold letters.
The only way out is to take his place.
Lily's heart pounded as the truth dawned on her. Eleanor had been trying to free herself. She hadn't succeeded, but she had left a way, a dark, terrible way. If Lily wanted to escape, she had to bind someone else to the house. The doorknob turned slowly behind her, and she heard Jacob's voice, low and cold.
Lily, open the door. You can't leave.
With trembling hands, she took a deep breath and made her decision. Slowly, she stepped back from the door and waited. As the door creaked open, Jacob, or whatever had taken control of him, stepped into the room, his eyes black as pitch, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of malice.
Thank you for joining us,
he whispered, reaching out a hand. In a sudden burst of courage, Lily reached out and grabbed his hand, pulling him forward with all her strength.
If you want me so badly, then take me.
She screamed, focusing all her fear and rage into one desperate act. As she pulled him closer, she whispered the words she had read in the journal, an incantation Eleanor had left behind, a ritual meant to bind a soul to the house. As she chanted, Jacob's face contorted, his body twisting and writhing as if in agony. Shadows rose around him, pulling him down as his eyes widened with horror. She finished the incantation, her voice strong, even as tears streamed down her face. She watched as the shadows engulfed Jacob, pulling him down into the depths of the house, his pleas growing fainter until they were swallowed by silence. The room fell still, the air heavy with a dark, ominous calm. Lily felt a strange, aching emptiness, as if part of her had been torn away. She looked around the room, and for the first time, it felt empty. Slowly, she turned and walked toward the door. It opened easily this time, and as she stepped out of the house, she felt the chill finally lift from her skin. The morning sun broke over the horizon, casting warm light over the village as she walked away from Willow Manor, her face pale but resolute. Behind her, the house stood silent, watching, waiting once more, and deep within its walls, a new name had been etched into the stone. They say Willow Manor is still there, perched at the edge of the village, watching. Sometimes on quiet nights, the villagers claim they can hear a man's voice, calling out from somewhere deep within, whispering a single name.